It was a Tuesday. Ordinary sky, ordinary breeze. But what I overheard through the thin hallway walls changed everything. We'll move in gradually. Dad won't even notice at first, my daughter whispered. He forgets things. We'll say it's temporary, then get the document signed. Quietly. The man with her husband, Josh, chuckled. That house will be ours within a year. The old man won't know what hit him. My name is Earl Whitmore. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever built something, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, only to realize your own blood saw it as something to steal? That house was more than just lumber and drywall. It was my wife's laughter, my son's footsteps, Sunday dinners, and decades of repairs with hands that now trembled. I gave my daughter keys when she was 16, told her, this will always be your home. I didn't realize she'd take that promise and sharpen it into a blade. The clues had been piling up. Mail redirected. Her name showing up on deliveries. Josh leaving tools in the garage like he owned the place. And lately, whispers died when I entered the room. But it was that conversation, that quiet, razor-edge plan, that pulled the final curtain back. They thought I was old, soft, tired. They didn't know that grief teaches you how to observe, how to listen without reacting. And while they plotted behind my back, I began preparing in silence, not just to defend what was mine, but to expose what they truly were. That night, I left the lights off, sat on the porch, watched the house I built turn colder from within. And in that stillness, I made a decision. If they were going to try and take me out of this house, then I'd show them just how dangerous a quiet man can be, especially one who's already lost everything worth fearing. The next morning, I brewed 2 cups of coffee. One for me. One left gently on the counter for her. She looked surprised. Thanks, Dad, she said, avoiding eye contact. Josh walked in moments later, barefoot like he owned the place. He slapped my shoulder. Mornin', old man. I smiled. The kind of smile people wear at funerals. While they settled in, I quietly went to the attic and pulled down a dusty box. The deed, insurance records, utility accounts, and something they didn't know existed. A revocable living trust. Signed 15 years ago. Every clause written by my late wife and me, designed for protection, not inheritance. I called an old friend, Benjamin Clark, estate attorney. Still owed me a favor from 1986. Ben, I said, it's time. Let's activate the trust. He didn't ask questions. He knew that tone. From that day on, I became a shadow in my own home, but a vigilant one. They didn't know I installed a tiny motion cam above the back entrance. Didn't know I logged their purchases, calls, and subtle attempts to reroute financial correspondence. Josh had a loud voice. He talked about updating the will. How old folks forget passwords. How it's just paperwork. I listened from the hallway, a notepad tucked behind my back. My daughter. She wasn't the girl who once built birdhouses with me in the yard. She had become sharp, cold, strategic. She talked about my health as if it were a countdown. Once he misses a few meds, she whispered, we'll have the doctor write something up. The doctor. Good thing I'd already visited him. Told him to expect lies. Told him to keep notes. Told him I'd be recording every appointment from now on. You see, they were playing checkers. But I'd been playing chess since before they were born. That night, I sat in my room, listening to them plan, and quietly activated the voice recorder hidden in the vent. They thought they were building a future, but every brick they laid was another step toward their fall. A week passed. They'd started calling the guest room our room. I watched as furniture was quietly replaced. My recliner disappeared, replaced by a sleek gray couch. Even my old quilt, the one my wife stitched during chemo, folded and shoved into a donation box without a word. I didn't flinch. Instead, I visited the county clerk's office. I had every legal document notarized, updated, and sealed. The trust now included a new clause. Upon any attempt to manipulate the primary homeowner through fraud or undue pressure, the estate is frozen, and a full audit is triggered. Ben laughed when he read it. Earl, You've just fireproofed your legacy. Meanwhile, back at the house, they grew bolder. Josh began inviting friends over. Loud ones with muddy shoes and cheap beers. I'd hear him brag on the porch. Yeah, this place? In a few months, it's ours. Father-in-law's just waiting to fade. Fade. Like I was some photograph on a mantelpiece. One evening, my daughter brought over an envelope. "Dad," she said gently, "we thought maybe it's time to put some things in writing. For your peace of mind." I opened it. A mock will. Typed on Josh's laptop. No lawyer, no witness. And guess who the primary beneficiary was? Not even her. It was him. Josh. She smiled like she'd handed me a thank you note. I stared at it, then looked at her, and said only 3 words. "I'll consider it." That night I scanned it, time-stamped it, logged the metadata, and sent it to Ben. "Proof of intent," I wrote. Because now, I had their fingerprints on the first act of theft. The next morning, I left early. Had breakfast at Rose's Diner, where I hadn't stepped in years. Pancakes, bacon, and quiet. Sometimes the calm before justice tastes like maple syrup and memory. When I returned, Josh had moved a second suitcase into the guest room. They thought I didn't see it, but I did. And just like that, the countdown began. By midweek, they acted like landlords. Josh started rearranging the kitchen. My kitchen. My late wife's cast iron skillet tossed into a cabinet, replaced with cheap nonstick nonsense. He called it modernizing. My daughter? She started using phrases like, "Once we settle the paperwork. And we're thinking of knocking out that back wall." I just nodded. Sounds big, I'd say, stirring my tea. But inside, I was winding the spring. That Friday, I invited them to dinner. Something I hadn't done in years. Made roast chicken, my wife's recipe. The smell alone brought back memories they never earned. We sat down. Candlelight. Napkins. Old jazz on the record player. I looked at them across the table. They wore polite faces, the kind worn by actors in a cheap play. Mid-meal, I raised my glass. "To family," I said. They clinked glasses with smug little grins. That's when I slid a folder across the table. Josh opened it. "What's this?" "An audit summary," I said, "of everything you've changed and everything you've said." He flipped the pages. Legal stamps. Witness affidavits. Copies of the mock will. Transcripts from recorded conversations. Dates. Times. Even voice logs. His face drained. My daughter's fork paused midair. "You've been recording us?" she whispered. "No," I said calmly. "I've been protecting what's mine." Josh chuckled nervously. "This doesn't prove anything." I leaned in. "Try me." Silence. I let it stretch. The kind of silence that tells you everything's already over. "You see," I said, "this house isn't just protected. It's watched, monitored, and now documented." I stood up and gathered the plates. "Dessert?" I asked, voice light. They didn't answer. Couldn't. Because for the first time, they realized they weren't winning. They weren't even playing the right game. And as they sat there, surrounded by candlelight, jazz, and the slow-burning weight of consequences, I smiled. Not because I had beaten them, but because they had handed me everything I needed, in their own words. They didn't say much the next morning. Josh left early. No smug shoulder pats. My daughter didn't even touch her tea. She sat on the edge of the couch, my couch, staring blankly, scrolling her phone like it held answers. But she didn't know the truth yet. They had already triggered a silent legal clause the moment that fake will was presented. Ben filed a petition with the trust board to freeze all transfer rights pending investigation. No sales. No name changes. No refinancing. In short, the house became a fortress. The next blow came Monday. A manila envelope arrived, delivered by hand. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a cease and desist letter addressed to Josh, an affidavit of trust activation, a printed photo of the two of them reviewing the forged will, and a note written in my hand. "You both have until the end of the month to move out, quietly, or this becomes public." That night, voices rose behind their closed door. I didn't eavesdrop. I didn't need to. You can tell when guilt starts to rot a person from the inside. It leaks through the walls. The next morning, Josh was waiting at the kitchen table. Red eyes. Clenched jaw. You'd really throw your own daughter out? I looked at him. Calm. Steady. She's the one who walked herself out. I just opened the door. He slammed his hand on the table. Unbelievable. No, I said. Predictable. That afternoon, I changed the locks. Not because I had to. Because I wanted them to hear each click and know. Their time was running out. That evening, I stood in the hallway and saw my daughter sitting in her childhood room, staring at an old photograph of us. She was maybe 10, holding a garden trowel, beaming beside me in the sun. She didn't look up. I watched for a long moment, then quietly walked away. Some regrets don't need words. They just sit beside you, in the silence you created for yourself. 3 days passed. Boxes appeared in the hallway, slowly at first, then hastily packed, like guilt had lit a fire beneath them. Josh stopped looking me in the eye. He'd begun sleeping in the car, disappearing for hours. The man who once strutted through my house in slippers now skulked like a trespasser. And my daughter? She avoided me entirely. Until one evening, she stood outside the door to my study. She hadn't stepped foot in that room in over a decade. Inside were books her mother once read aloud, her childhood drawings, a jar of beach sand from a forgotten family trip. She knocked once. I didn't turn. I was just trying to make sure everything would be easier, she said softly. I let the silence answer. She stepped inside. Dad, we were scared, she continued. You're alone. You forget things sometimes. Josh said. Stop. She did. I turned toward her. Finally. You wanted the house, I said. Not because I was slipping, but because you thought I wouldn't fight back. Her eyes welled up, but I didn't trust those tears. They weren't grief. They were the tears of a child who finally got caught. I raised you better, I said. Or maybe. I only thought I did. She looked down. This room, I said, gesturing around, was the one place you never touched. Not even when your mom passed. I know, she whispered. Why now? Her voice cracked. Because I miss her. That hurt more than anything. Not because it wasn't true, but because she tried to use that ache as leverage. I walked past her, gently shut the study door. I'll always love the girl who used to paint seashells by my side, I said. But I don't know the woman who stood beside a man plotting to erase me. No response. Just quiet footsteps retreating down the hallway. That night, I opened an old photo album and realized the daughter I once knew was gone. What remained was someone about to lose everything she tried to steal. The night before they moved out, I couldn't sleep. I walked the halls slowly barefoot, the same way I had when she was a baby and wouldn't stop crying. Back then, I'd hum old songs, carry her against my chest, whisper stories until she slept. Now I stood outside her childhood room and heard only the hum of cardboard tape being sealed. The betrayal had happened, the damage done, but somewhere between the silence and the boxes, I still remembered the girl I once raised. So I did something unexpected. I left a letter on her pillow. Not a legal document. Not a warning. Just a letter. It read, You were born in this house. Your first steps were here. Your mother cried in that kitchen when you scraped your knee and laughed on this porch when you said your first full sentence. I built this home for love, not for war. You tried to take it from me. Not with weapons, but with silence, deceit, and distance. You broke something that took a lifetime to build. And still, I want you to know this. I don't hate you, but I see you now. And that's worse. I signed it with my name, not Dad. Because that word, it had to be earned again. The next morning, they were gone. No goodbyes. No apologies. Just an empty driveway and 2 house keys left on the table. I walked through the house. Every room breathed easier. I stood in the garden she once helped me plant, the soil soft from last night's rain. And I finally let go of the hope that she'd be different. Some people don't return to who they were. They just keep walking in the direction they chose until they disappear. But me? I stayed, rooted. And in staying, I reclaimed more than just my home. I reclaimed my peace. Weeks passed. The house grew quiet again, not empty, just healed. No footsteps that didn't belong. No strange names on deliveries. No voices behind doors whispering of my end. I spent mornings in the sunroom, reading the same books my wife once held. Afternoons in the garden, hands in the soil, breath steady. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Ben, the attorney. He handed me an envelope, smiled faintly. "This came through the trust office," he said. "Figured you'd want to see it." Inside was a legal filing. Josh had tried to contest the trust. He claimed coercion, mental decline, ownership confusion. But the documents I'd prepared, the recordings, the signed witness statements, they sealed everything. The judge's words were printed clearly. Claim denied. Trust stands. All claims against Earl Whitmore's estate are hereby dismissed with prejudice. I set the letter down. No celebration, no laughter, just peace. That night, I pulled out one last envelope I had written long ago, addressed to my daughter. I never mailed it. It read, "If you're reading this, it means you lost. But maybe you also gained something. You saw what happens when you trade love for entitlement. When you choose a man's ambition over your father's trust. There's still time to become the woman your mother would have been proud of. But not in this house. Not today." I burned that letter, not out of spite, but because I no longer needed her to read it. The lesson had already been written, in court records, in quiet mornings, in the locked door she no longer had a key for. This house, the one they tried to take, still stands. And so do I, older, wiser, alone but never lonely, because I now live in truth. And truth? It can't be stolen.